Hey, buddy.
Morning. Hey, dude, may the 40s be with you, bro.
And also with you when you get there.
I'm working on it.
You are. One day at a time.
I wore a Star Wars shirt last night
Did
to the student house supper.
What does it say?
May the force be with you.
Oh.
That's a got a comment on it. I said, May 4th is right around the corner. So
Yeah.
just getting ready. That's why I missed St. Patty's Day today.
Oh, you were already thinking of May 4th?
Yeah, exactly. That's where my head's at.
Do you say that May the 4th be with you when you get to...
If I remember.
Yeah. We missed Pi Day.
I know. I was actually going to mention that.
When would that wasn't on a recording day though?
No, the 14th. So that would have been like Friday, right?
Wow, you get Pi Day, St. Urhos Day, and St. Patrick's Day all in a week?
Kaboom, dude.
What a celebration.
Mega week. Yeah, I've never really...
Three things I didn't celebrate.
Yeah. I've never really celebrated Pi Day.
No.
If Peter Piettel, if you're listening, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But I do enjoy the formulas he sent.
What I did celebrate, though, yesterday was my son Max's baptism birthday.
Ooh.
So that's on St. Urhos Day.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
So we do like the baptism candle and sing happy baptism birthday to you. That's what we do.
How old? How many? How old is he?
11.
Baptismally. 11. Nice. How old is he actually?
11.
Nice. Infant baptism. What up?
Yeah. But when my wife and I got married, my dad did he did like the message for our wedding, and then we had another pastor do the vows and stuff. But he had this thing called the cup of blessing, which I wish I remember much about. But it was a cup of blessing. And it wasn't representative of like the Lord's Supper, but it was, instead of doing like a unity candle or something like that, it was this thing. And so he got us this little like goblet, and it has our names engraved on it and the wedding date and stuff. So
that's pretty cool.
So then we were like, well, what should we do with this goblet thing? So it sits on a shelf, but then we decided when it's your baptism birthday, you get to drink out of it.
Oh, no kidding.
So,
that is awesome. Yeah.
So Max got to drink out of the goblet yesterday.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. Big fan of goblets.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever called it a goblet before.
I'm glad you did.
Chalice? What else do you call it? You can picture what I mean by a goblet.
100%.
And it's probably exactly what we have.
Yeah. I hope so. Yeah. It's looking good.
Yeah.
We picked up a bunch of goblets when I was in St. Louis. There's a whole set. We got like, I don't know, 30 maybe, 24, something like that, which we then proceeded to really never use, because when are you going to use a goblet, you know? We did a couple times and it was fun, but there was a time at the seminary when we did different presentations on the Lord's Supper, speaking of the cup of blessing which we bless, and so it was supposed to be different ways in history that it has been celebrated. And so my group had like the early church version, which would have been like more of just in like the context of a meal, like a bigger meal. So yeah, that's what we did, and we used the goblets.
Nice.
That was their most celebrated use. Yeah, I was very happy about that.
Remember when I came over to dinner at your house like early on, and I was like, these plates look familiar, and they were the plates that my family had growing up. That was funny. Then my dad, when he was retiring and moving out of his office, found one of those plates in his office and brought it to you.
And a mug, which we did not have. We were missing.
Oh, was it a mug, not a plate?
It might have been both. I think it was one.
Like a saucer?
Yeah, there was like a small saucer, and then, this little, like probably 6-ouncer coffee cup.
Now you have it.
Now we feel complete. Thanks, Bob. We do use it.
We
do use it.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Did you do anything fun this weekend?
This weekend,
tapping trees, maple syrup.
Yeah. I mean, that's all been tapped. We're collecting now. We're in the collection phase. Thankfully, I mean, there was a bunch late last week. I mean, the temps were. It's when it goes above freezing and below freezing that like the trees turn into pistons in my mind. But they churn it out, and so we had a bunch of that last week. So yeah, when we collected on like Friday, we realized, oh my gosh, We got a lot of sap.
Okay.
We got to start boiling this stuff. Yeah, we typically fill 2 55-gallon trash cans. Right now, they're one's about 85%, the other's 75%
Oh, wow.
full. Yeah.
Nice.
Thankfully, it's kind of slowed down. I mean, we have another trash can we could pull out if we need to. But yeah, collected sap. Kids played outside. We're loving the snow, eking away. That's been great. We busted out the Stomp Rockets.
Oh.
Yeah, kids had a blast with that. I had a time collecting them after they went down our hill into the snow that goes up to your waist. But no, it was great.
Nice.
It was great. That was that's the fun that I can remember.
Nice.
Yeah.
I played a new board game last night. You probably would like it.
It's piquing my interest already.
That's not really a board game. That's just a party game. But it's called Hitster. And you scan a QR code and each card plays a song. So, and then you have to put the cards in a timeline, basically. So you have to know so you're listening to the song, and then on the other side it tells you when the song was released and who it is and all that stuff. So then you have to put it in and then whatever team gets to 10 in a row first wins. Very simple.
I love it.
Yeah, it was fun.
And you were playing, I presume, with extended family.
Yeah,
Had
with
some
my
family
wife
in town?
and then my wife's brother and my sister-in-law.
Now, are they musically gifted? You and Abby are pretty musically gifted.
Yeah, it seemed my brother-in-law. Some people just remember stuff. You remember movies and all those things.
Sure. That's how he is with music and such.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed to be. So,
was it family v family? Did you mix it up?
No, we had in-laws versus siblings at first, and then we went boys versus girls after that.
Nice.
So, yep, it was fun. It was a good game.
Fun.
Yeah. So how about Luke?
Dude, how about him?
What
a guy.
What a guy. I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah, Luke, we're walking through Luke in this season of Lent and preaching on particularly stories and texts that are exclusive to Luke.
Right.
As we go through, and I was kind of excited to share because I knew about that particular piece when it comes to salvation in Luke. So in Luke's gospel, there's I didn't say this in the sermon, but Luke is the only gospel that even only synoptic gospel. So Matthew, Mark, and Luke of those three is the only one to even use the word salvation.
Is that right?
That's right. It doesn't show up in Matthew or Mark. Now the word save does show up.
Okay.
So just like when Luke talks about your faith has saved you, made you well, you get a little bit of that in Matthew and Mark as well. But there's a little more of an emphasis on salvation. I remember, I'm forgetting his name. I don't know if you ever had him, a professor at the seminary, kind of quiet, soft-spoken guy.
Oswald.
Yes, thank you. Is Jeff?
Yeah.
Jeffrey, hey, if you're watching, Jeff, thanks for this insight. But he wrote just a little blurb on Luke, I think in one of those Concordia journals, but talking about Luke's emphasis on salvation and that line. I think he even used that line about Jesus on the cross. He saved others, but he can't save himself. It's like, what does he mean by that? Because those other people that he saved haven't died and gone to heaven, right? So Luke's got this kind of usage of salvation that gets us thinking more about maybe the holistic sense of salvation, right? Like, let's not just immediately spiritualize this word.
And future oriented,
but consider its whole ramification, application, even here in the present.
Yeah, that was, I remember you saying that in the sermon, and that was a striking statement. I think probably, I would imagine for a number of people that when Jesus or in the scriptures talk about salvation, that we're not just talking about eternal life and going to heaven when you die, but that you've actually been saved in this life as well. Right.
And this is something I think you and I have even talked about. Like, for us personally, it's been a very exciting discovery, something that we didn't necessarily grow up like, oh yeah, that's exactly how I think about it. Like, this has been a more recent or, kind of emerging biblical truth that's getting more airtime by certain authors anyways. We went through that N.T. Wright sermon series a couple years ago now, which was also very, very much on that specific topic. But that's huge. I mean,
Oh, absolutely.
It's a game changer.
Well, and that's what you see. That's what you see Jesus doing in the Gospels when he heals somebody or casts out the demon, which is, healing or whatever. Their life is changed. They are saved from the thing that was afflicting them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wonder, for lifelong Christian people, if you've always been a church going person and life's been kind of, just good and relatively easy, if it's hard for you to get to the place of understanding, like, well, what have I been saved from?
Right. Especially we talked about infant baptism or alluded to it just earlier in this podcast, is a very different when, like, experientially, to talk to somebody who church wasn't a part of their growing up. Church wasn't a part of their, the norm of their life. And so oftentimes in those kinds of stories, there are some like real particular things you can kind of look at and point at, not unlike the parable that we looked at, the story we looked at in Luke, where Jesus is talking with this Pharisee, but then there's also this woman who comes in who has had a kind of a scandalous life. Like there's more obvious differences for someone who did not grow up in the community of God's people, and then later comes to, because, and this makes sense, I think, right? If you grow up in the community of God's people, like, you're going to hear about the statutes, the rules, the laws, the wisdom. I mean, let's give it a positive sense, right? Hey, here are the things that are really good for you. Be about these things. Live into this. And so there's probably more inclination for people in those communities, to take that wisdom, apply it to their life, and not fall into some of the traps and snares that exist out there. And so it might look like less life change, right? I mean, that's kind of what we're talking about, life change. But so for those of us who have grown up in the church, is there maybe this, have we fallen into this trap of thinking that our faith is primarily future oriented,
Yeah, well, and I think if we flesh it out, one of the other things that you drew upon in your sermon too, kind of comparing and contrasting these two figures, and this story that we're talking about is in Luke chapter 7, by the way. These two figures between the prostitute and the Pharisee, and you drew that out, that there's two main ways that you can rebel against God. One is the really like overt, disobeying his rules and laws and, living into sin. The other way that I think a lot of people don't think about too much is self-righteousness or piety. That's the Pharisaical tendency to think like, well, I've got it all together and I don't think I really need Jesus, Right. And so I was just kind of thinking, those two things together, like, it can be perhaps the Pharisaical tendency of self-righteousness might lend itself also to think like, maybe I don't really need much saving now. Sure, at the end I need to be saved from death and things, but like right now, I mean, I'm not like really that bad of a sinner, I think. So sure, I guess I need it in the end because I want to go to heaven or whatever, but like I don't really know what I need Jesus for now, I think that those two things probably go hand in hand.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's so helpful to remember, because I think when we read the scriptures, we're so used to the Pharisees being the enemies of Jesus, We're so used to the Pharisees being like, man, they're out to get Jesus, trying to kill him, that we forget, like, these are the religious leaders, though, within the same community that Jesus is from. Yeah. Like, it's not like
and they've been the ones that people have been listening to, looking up to for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Right. Yes. So all the more warning for us if we've been a part of, say, church culture, like grown up with it, like there is a capacity for us to, I don't know, be desensitized to it, like assume, like you kind of alluded to already, like, I kind of know all this, like, oh yeah, I've always done this, there's nothing here, like I need this in the future. There's gonna come a time, or maybe something really bad will happen in my life, and then I'll really have to draw upon, my faith. But, kind of the day to day, I'm good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope that I hope that those of you listening that's not your experience, but I think for a lot of American Christians that kind of ends up being the experience, and I think that's why there's I think it's a reason why there's more and more secularization in our culture, because people sort of are in that standpoint where with the abundance of life or the abundance of things in life, and access to information and education and health and all the stuff, that it can be very I don't know, it could be, you can live life sort of just going through the motions and thinking that everything's okay. We're
not maybe like presented with as many immediate dangers that former peoples have had to.
Well, not even former. I mean, just
sure, around the world, not in first world countries. Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. And also, I mean, I will also say, like, if hearing us kind of talk about that experience of faith or church or God in that sort of like kind of lukewarmish way, like I can honestly say that was my experience. Like I have had that experience, where for me personally, this sort of change about my own faith has come, I guess, in a couple ways. Like one, being in the position that I am in, I'm now having to wrestle a bit closer, with the scriptures. It's like, if you're going to teach it, you got to know it. And then I was going to say, unfortunately, but that is, like there's a resistance to the kinds of experiences, kind of the offensiveness of Jesus. There's a resistance to that. We don't want to experience it, but it is how God seems to refine us, like through suffering, right? It's like through the facing of hard things that I would rather not face. So like in one sense, for me, this has become more of a recognizing the activity of God presently and personally in my life has become far more abundant. One, because I've kind of by necessity of my vocation had to consider and wrestle with the Word of God more intimately than I was prior. And then the second piece, and I think it's kind of connected to that, but like I just personally also, I guess whatever floor I thought I was standing on of my own self-righteousness sort of bottomed out, It's like, oh, crud. and that wasn't, it's not like that happened just because, like I was wrestling with the Word of God, and then all of a sudden I had the revelation, and then I kind of went through this. I don't know, life is not as clean and tidy as that, you know what I mean? Like these things kind of come sometimes slowly, sometimes quickly, sometimes they come and you don't even recognize what they are when they're coming, and then you look back and you realize things. But anyways, all that to say, if that's where you are, you don't have to stay there. And if your experience of Christianity is sort of like, like, oh, it's nice. Oh my gosh, there's so much more. So much more. Yeah.
And I've had this conversation before with others, who are mature in the faith, like thinking, oh man, I wish I had some like dramatic experience, where I was, saved from alcoholism or something, and they're like, why would you wish that? Like,
right.
So I've come to realize, like, no, I actually don't want that. I want to live a good and decent and orderly life, trusting in Jesus and raising my family and others around me in a good, godly way. Like that is a good thing to strive for and an awesome experience. And so I'm not like, so I don't, we're not like, I'm not saying, wish, ill upon yourself. But I think if you've had a neat and orderly and good life, trusting in Jesus, and feel lukewarm in the faith, I think one of the challenges then would be to shine the light of Jesus into the dark places and in the lives of other people, and walk with other people who are going through difficult situations in life, and you will then walk together in this story of transformation and salvation, and see that occur. And so walking with other people as well, through this life of faith, will enhance your faith as well. And that experience is incredible. And so I think this is the thing, and I've had this conversation a number of times, even with people within our church, that have told me, well, I don't have very many experiences with non-Christian people, and my life is pretty isolated right now, where I just kind of spend time with my family or come to church, and that's experientially it. No, that's not bad. That's good. Like, I'm glad that you are, being formed by the Christian community. But the call of Jesus to follow him means to follow him into lots of different places and be witnesses of him to people who would never hear about Jesus if it were not for people bringing Jesus to them. And so, once you start doing that and having those experiences, that'll make your faith very, very real. And you will see that the salvation that we're talking about, the salvation in the present moment, that's where you'll start to see that. If you're not experiencing it yourself, you'll see it lived out in other people. So
yeah, and I would hesitate to make. I'll just say that this formula is not as strong or as reliable as the formula Jesus gives in the parable about he who has been forgiven much loves much. Right? Very interesting that Jesus gives us that dynamic.
Would you call that a theorem? A proof.
See, I wouldn't. Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't call it a theorem. That sounds too much like theory. Because since Jesus said it, I'm thinking this thing's slam dunk reliable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
with the languages,
math term. Wasn't that in geometry class? And theorems
and proofs.
Yeah.
Yeah, in geometry. Yeah. I just call it a formula or an equation. But I will say this, like to your point, when it comes to who we're connected to, and I would agree with you that it's a good thing. It is a good thing to spend time with the Christian community and to be formed together in the way of Jesus with our brothers and sisters. But always keeping in mind that gospel narrative, and by gospel narrative, I mean Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, When you look at Jesus and you look at the Pharisees, I know which group was only spending time with those who thought like themselves. And it wasn't Jesus, right? Like if Jesus is who we're trying to be formed into, part of what we're forming into is someone who has the spiritual strength, let's say, and confidence to go into those relationships and encounters with people who are far from God, which will ironically end up including even some people who think they're very close to God.
Yeah. Not getting too far ahead. We don't want to jump ahead.
Oh, yeah.
But we are going to look at the parable of the Good Samaritan next week. So that'll be right in line with this conversation. So more on that next week. Spoiler alert.
More to come. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. I think the other piece I would add to experiencing the in the moment, present day salvation and healing for any one of us is connected to Jesus in his Sermon on the Mount does something pretty interesting when it comes to what we consider to be right and wrong or light and dark. And that is, he says the internal experience is equivalent. It's on the same level as the external. right? So, I mean, part of the challenge of like guys like Simon the Pharisee and others who Jesus acts with is they seem to think because they have not, this goes back to the whole idea of testimony, because they have not done all these wicked, evil things, behaviors that are external and visible. Therefore, yeah, they're pretty good. They don't, like, what are they, they're doing fine. We'll take you for the death thing. That'll be helpful. But Jesus says, no, what you experience inside, what you think, what you imagine, what you feel, those experiences are just as real as the external. So like the biggest one that we commonly think of, right, is when Jesus says, you've heard it said, do not murder. I say to you, don't even be angry with your brother. Don't call him a fool in your mind, right? And so this is where Jesus begins to invite us to really reflect and think about, what do I think of other people? What is going on inside of me? And that is not an easy journey. Like even just a have time, let alone make time, like to ponder those kinds of things. Like part of the challenge is, if you haven't done that, I promise you, if you try to start, you're not going to like what you find. I mean, this is what all the spiritual formation folks talk about, is that there's kind of like a closet almost within us, and as soon as you start opening up, it's filled with all these things that just start kind of dumping out. But that once we start attending to those things, that's when we start to come in touch with, if we haven't had the testimony of the life of someone like the woman in the parable, we'll begin to see, oh my goodness, I'm not as far away from them as I maybe thought I was. Here are things that I guess have been there and I just haven't attended to them, or they haven't come fully up and out of me and I've actualized it. And that's the whole point about, don't go and try and build a testimony. You don't need to go find the darkness. It's already there. Yeah. I mean, that's Jesus in, I don't think Luke's gospel, but talking to the Pharisees about where evil comes from. It's not external. It comes out of the heart. Right. Oh, yeah. So we're all in the same boat. And this is, see, at the same time, it's just like, well, I think I called it unfortunate earlier. Like if you attend to yourself, there'll be some things that you will be sad that you learn about yourself. But the beauty of the gospel is God already knew that. God already saw that. Jesus makes space for those. And what's more, when you start connecting those pieces to God's steadfast forever love of you in the midst of all that, the equation's already starting to work. You're recognizing his forgiveness of you, and you know what that's going to translate to, according to Jesus? Love. A deeper love, a more profound love, a more radical experience of the gospel in your life. And so that's where, don't settle for the lukewarm. Yeah. Don't settle for the lukewarm. There's so much more that the gospel gives. And when you start experiencing that, it will also start translating into external things. Like the external does come, and it'll come more naturally, because now it's not you trying to do the right thing. It's the Spirit of God in you, correcting, rebuking, but also guiding you to those things that are good for others. These external things that we do, that we should do, that are helpful. And then the experience of those things will be all the more beautiful, because you'll see that it's the presence of God in you. So.
Absolutely. That's a good word, bud. Yeah, I think that's a decent place just to
let it ride.
Put a pin on that and let it be. So let's end it.
Let's do it, man.
All right, episode 201.
Here we go. Next century. Here we go.
All right, here we go. Peace.